We'll call the meeting to order. Mr. Auditor, the calling of the roll, please.
Chris Schweitzer,
Here.
John Marvel,
Here.
Darren Dyer,
Here.
Brandon Steckman,
Here.
Tony Brewer, Brian Coister,
Here.
Emily Crapo.
Here.
Did I miss anybody?
Senator President. All right, thank you. Are there any additions or revisions to the agenda? If everything will be covered, could be in new business. So. Hearing none, Brady sent the minutes yesterday to all of us, so any motion to approve those from last meeting?
We have two sets. One for the financial, we didn't get done.
I'll make a motion to approve the finance committee minutes.
All in favor? Aye. Next set would just be our general minutes for the meeting. Later.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, motion carries. Neil, you're up.
Hey, good morning. I'm reporting on the month of February. We had 10 events in February, which totaled 13 event days. Total attendance was a little over 1,200. Gross revenue was a little over 52,000. So a slower month for us. You'll see the next page has list of events that we hosted. One of those at the bottom, you'll see St. Patrick's School visit and museum tour. We've had a lot of schools that have set up tours for the museum, and they've opted to site as well, so they can keep the kids all contained in one area. Looking at operations, we had a bollard installed in our kitchen by the hotel connector doors. What's kind of happens sometimes is when kitchen staff goes and pushes, all of our hot boxes line up in that narrow hallway right there. That's where all of the outlets are for them. And sometimes they might push them a little close to the door, and so folks try to open that door, it might smack into a box. So we installed a bollard there. So that way boxes can't go any further than a certain point, so that we've got egress at all times. And then we also moved a fire extinguisher to that location, so it doesn't get bumped by the boxes on the other side of the wall, because you have a very narrow corridor to get through. We had Sycamore Engineering come in and run 2 data lines into the freezer and walk-in. We've got new temperature sensors in there, so that way we can have that monitored at all times. So if we were to have a temperature start raising in the freezer, then we get an alert so that we know that, hey, something's not, if we're out for a 3-day weekend, we don't want to come back to a 40-degree freezer, when everything should be at 0 degrees. So those are installed and working properly now. We had elevator number 3 out in the garage, went out of service for a couple days during the extreme cold. It was due to the heater tripping in the top. I think it was just getting so cold in there. When Kone came out, they had that week that we had all that ice and those really extreme temperatures. They had a lot of garages in Indianapolis that was having the same problems where they're having to shut down elevators. You can't operate them when they get to a certain temperature. So we did have one that went down for about 3 days, and then they were able to get it back online once the heat got to a certain point to where it could operate safely. Went through monthly regular checks with extinguishers, elevators, and AED inspections. We also did our annual fire alarm testing. Corson came out, and when they did the testing, we noticed that one of our exterior strobes wasn't functioning. That was fixed. Batteries were replaced by Corson. We had a heat sensor in the parking garage that had a short, and that was repaired as well. Corson also did backflow inspections. Those passed, and we did have to purchase some additional sprinkler heads for the skylights per new code requirements. So staying on top of all of those things. On sales and marketing front, last month they contracted 11 definite events totaling 35,000. They're working 29 leads, which are proposals that are out, and then they've got 22 contracts that were out. So, next couple pages are just sales and marketing initiatives. I won't go through all of these. Big thing that's coming up, we've got Mother's Day brunch that we're already promoting. We're already selling tickets. I think we've sold about 30 tickets for that. The day that Alyssa put the promo up, I think she sold 4 tickets immediately. It wasn't even up for a couple minutes and people were already buying tickets. So Mother's Day, we're looking forward to that annual event. moving back to the statistics page. You can see, for 2025, current through the end of the year, we've got 54 definite events that are contracted. Gross revenue is over 400,000 with 20 contracts out, 18 proposals out, and then looking at 2026, you can see we've got 1 definite event, 2 contracts out, which are the firms, 11 tentative events. And then 2027, which that won't start to get heavy until we get partway through, closer to the end of this year. But looking at total funnel, we've got almost $1.4 million in business in the funnel, current period forward, and total room nights is a little over, almost 3,500 room nights.
Cindy, also
Yes.
1.4 million through the end of the fiscal year, or just in total?
In
beyond?
total through 27. And that's just looking today, it's not going backwards, it's just looking current forward. Next is just the February stats, kind of just shows you what our events were, type of events, attendance by type, revenue by type. Going over to the next page, just several graphs. You can see gross revenue by month. I did fix the colors from last month. I had them kind of mixed up a little bit. But if you look at the bottom, the gross revenue by month, year over year, you'll see January, February is in there, March. Will be completed next month, you'll see where we end on March. But this is just showing, year over year, a comparison by month. Parking revenue and hotel rooms are on the next page. And then if you look at the last page of graphs, this is our pace. So you'll see a gray line, a gray bar that shows where we are according to how we're pacing. Now, what I don't include in these numbers where the gray is our to be booked. This is just identified business. So each month, we might have 30,000, 20,000 in certain months that sales still needs to go find, because we know that we can find that, or we should be able to find more business to go in those months.
Are you doing the April Easter brunch again? Did you do that? in the
We did
past?
Mother's Day.
Mother's Day, okay, I was wondering, because I was looking at April, it looked a little bit behind last year, but I mean, collectively, this first quarter, the first 3 months, obviously.
Yes, this is
Very
always a
good.
slower time.
Yeah, very good improvement. That January push was good, so I was wondering what could go on in April.
Mother's Day auctions in May.
Yes, yeah, and we will have our Mother's Day brunch, and then we'll have GE that will be here in May too, which I don't think all of our GE numbers are in here either yet. We're still working on trying to finalize those. Looking at the museum, year-to-date attendance is, not year-to-date, this should be since opening, is about 8,700. We get a lot of walk-ins. After this month, our reservation system actually expires in May. So we'll take it down in April. I don't feel like it's really needed unless we have big groups, which we could go to a free version for large groups. And then we'll just have on there, we'll continue to take walk-in information when folks come into the museum. We still want to collect information on where folks are coming from, how far, how far they're traveling, how many people are with their party. So we'll still collect the walk-in information as they come in, so that we know, how many people are coming and where they're coming from. Any questions?
I've got a question. Operationally, you've got the last note there, we had to purchase additional sprinkler heads for skylights per new code requirements. How's that getting communicated to you? I mean, does the consultant or
It
the
doesn't. So they came in, did an inspection, and the person who did the inspection said we were short on sprinkler heads, and we haven't replaced any. We have the same amount that we've had every inspection, and he said we were short. And so Brady made a couple calls, and I guess there's a new code that had changed. We didn't know, so we just had them purchase them for us.
My understanding, which I think is a pretty good one, is when the code changes, that is effective for buildings going forward. It's not retroactive, and every building that has a skylight, you know, in the state of Indiana has to go in and change their sprinkler head, so. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it, but I'm just curious if they said, hey, the code changed, you have to do this.
No, we didn't know until they came in and did an inspection.
Right, but then how do they communicate it to you? Do they say, hey, you're in violation of the code and you need to do this?
That's what we were told when they were on site.
See, I don't know that.
Corson or the city?
It was Corson.
Corson.
City.
It was someone who wasn't here before, and that's kind of what our argument was, is that we've passed inspection every time, we've had the same amount. Cause that very first inspection we did when we opened, we did have to add a couple sprinkler heads, cause it was the very first one, which they put in the box. But nothing's changed.
Can you get that code number that he was referencing?
Yeah, I can find
Have
out.
Brady send it over to me, and then I'll have our city fire inspector look at it, because we've actually run the. I've had the same conversation with a number of people with outside entities that do fire inspections, not the city,
Okay,
that have led to the same
gotcha.
issues.
Add me to that list, Brent.
Yeah, especially with your bill.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you about your presentation to the Rotary in Indianapolis. How did it go? Did they have a lot of questions about?
It was good. I basically talked to them about, like the conception of the museum and, you know, how it all came about. I talked to them about the board, you know, the food and beverage tax. So it was wasn't just about what's in the museum. I talked to them kind of about what the process was to get the museum up and running. And then I didn't put a lot of pictures in my presentation because I want people to come to the museum, but I showed them a few of the things that are in the museum, what they could expect to see here. And then I also talked about the other museums that are downtown and within walking distance, you know, to the museum. So I didn't want it to just be all about Prairie Bird. What else do we have down here too that we could get them, entice them to come down and see? It went really well. There were about 60 or 70 people that were there for the weekly lunch that they do. It was right downtown. It was really good. It was very well received.
Have any of the other local service groups been in contact with you? On the presentation?
Pam, the next day, talked to Rotary locally. So she did the local chapter the day after I was in Indianapolis. And we've talked, not specifically about the Bird Museum, but we have had a lot of speaking events with local organizations about convention centers, just not about the museum.
Any other questions for you? Okay. Operate or update on the operating budget, so. Do we have one from?
Kyle?
Okay, Kyle, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Whenever you're up.
Good morning, everyone. This is Kyle Carlson with Baker Tilly. And if you guys go ahead and turn to the cash flow that I provided yesterday morning, we can go through a couple of things with this update. Kind of wanted to start first with the food and beverage tax revenues. When you look at the first quarter of 2025 and compare it to the first quarter of 2024, food and beverage revenues are up 4%. This is a little misleading in the fact that last year, the March collection for you guys was way down. I think it was down 50,000 from where it was in 2023. So it is good to see, you know, the food and beverage revenues up in 2 of the 3 months in 2025 comparing to 2024, but maybe slightly misleading. And then if you go ahead and look at we're on page 2 here. If you look at the expenditures in February, you'll see expenditures of around 152,000. The biggest portion of that was replenishing the operating account for Oakview Group. And you can see the ending cash balance is end of February of 3.5 million, and the available cash was just over 3 million. And also just an update, thank you to Larry, Tammy, Morgan, kind of assisting getting the USI premium information to us. And so we kind of have a better grasp on the amount, the level of premiums for the convention center, Indiana Theater, and the Larry Bird Museum, and we can kind of better illustrate that in the 2026 cash flow page once we break that out by month. So we'll kind of have a better idea of when those expenditures and the amounts will occur. So thank you for that information, and that's really all the updates that we have, unless there are questions.
On that. Any questions for Kyle? All right, move on. Thank you, Kyle. Update on the Indiana Theater. Brian, you want to do that one?
Oh, I would want to steal your thunder, Chris, go ahead.
There's not much of an update. Brian and I were on a Zoom call with Studio Access, Green Sign Company, and Guarantee Roofing. They're still moving forward on the new sign for the canopy, which Karen's gonna sell sponsorships for.
If we're allowed to, Eddie.
If we're allowed to, which we're gonna be allowed to. So that's rolling. Other than that, when we get to committees and stuff like that, I'll address some stuff with theaters. Any questions? Yeah. Larry Bird Museum, John, you want to give a short synopsis of what's going on over there?
Yes, they will be short. We've had 2 or 3 Zoom meetings with the individuals involved in the Bird Museum. Terry was even brought back onto the main floor she was really the brains behind the financial part of it. She remembered practically everything that we paid for out of that museum, and she was very vocal about we had to do something about finding out what the problem was, and so we're working on that, working with our museum expert, Mark Madursky, and hopefully we'll figure it out what's going on. To Neil, there was a question about perhaps the humidity and condensation in the room in there. We have monitors. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so in each case, we have humidity loggers. And I can pull the data out of all of those loggers. They're in a case, but they're not airtight, so it's very similar to the air that's in the museum. And it shows us what the temperature is. They basically pull time four times a day, and it'll pull like the temperature, what the humidity and the dew point is in the room. And so we can go through, and I ran one, I did them yesterday, and I went back from last May to yesterday. So you can see where they go up and where they go down, and there's really not a big swing in variance, from hour to hour, day by day. It's pretty consistent in there. Average temperature or average humidity should be between, from my understanding, 40% to about 60%, and we're consistently, in that range.
Yeah, we have it.
And Neil, as she just stated, she's pulled all these logs, and this is just one of the humidity logs from the first one that she pulled. And you can look down the sheet here, and there is not a problem with humidity and condensation in that. But they're alleging there might be. So we're going to have to dig a little further into it. But I want to thank her for doing what she's doing in there, and we'll get it figured out one way or the other.
Any questions or comments about the waiver museum? Eddie, anything on legal matters?
Pleasure to be here.
All right, 6.1, officer and committee appointments. So printed everybody a book from where the CIB came from in 2018 to where it is now. It has all the resolutions since or until April of last year, current in the book. It has all the multi-party agreements, the payment plans for the city and counties at CBB on how they're paying for the convention center, all the bylaws, the provisions, our remote meeting policy, purchasing policies, the interlocal agreement between the city, county, and CEB. And, as of April 24, the convention center's budgets and Baker Tilly's cash flows. So if there's ever any questions that you might have about CIB procedures or anything like that, it's all in this book. So you have that. Committee appointments, I emailed out, I believe Monday, I spelled Brian Foyer's name wrong, I texted him and apologized. The executive committee, construction committee, finance and investment committee, and the communications committee, so. We're about to elect a vice president here in just a few minutes, so the executive committee will be myself as president, the vice president, and the treasurer. The construction committee, which I'm extremely grateful for, the chair is Brian, of course, he has a long history of construction here in Terre Haute. Karen Dyer, bringing the SAC fund. The finance and investment committee, the chairman is Brandon as treasurer, Mr. Brewer. And John volunteered to do that job, so the finance committee is kind of tasked with showing up at 8:30, half hour before the 9 AM meeting to approve all the claims and invoices. And the communications committee is Emily as chair, Karen and John Marvel. So are there any questions about that? Okay. Well, we have to make a motion to elect a vice president for the board. So. Entertain the motion.
Make a motion to nominate John Marvel as vice president.
Second.
All in favor?
Uh,
Any opposed? Congratulations, John. That means there's a vacancy in the secretary position of the CIB, so we'll have to elect a secretary. We'll entertain the motion.
Make a motion for Brian Coyster to be secretary.
Second by Mr. Marvel. Got that ready? Oh, yeah, it's recording. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations, Brian. Okay, before we get to other business here, Mayor, you had organized a meeting between us and the casino last week. You want to touch base on that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So, after, discussions here at the board, we wanted to meet with the casino. Really just to discuss, and to Neil, really to discuss how we can better leverage, all of our economic development assets in the community. I think it was a very productive meeting, working on scheduling, working on connecting, large groups that do come here. Private direct transportation from the convention center to the casino. I think it was a good time. Mike Rich, their regional general manager, came as well as their general manager and their legal counsel. So it does sound like we've got a better path moving forward when it comes to communication and event size. They are, I could see for some events how they are competing venues, but ultimately when it comes to conventions and larger events, this is by far the more premium destination. Having recently put on the Regional Employment Expo, which was basically our largest job fair since pre-COVID, it's very clear from a space perspective and menu perspective where you would go. So I can tell that from the firsthand booking experience, but I think from overall it went well. There's a clear delineation of what they're going after. And the focus of the conversation was more connecting the two assets, getting people who come in, whether it's honestly Laverne Gibson on the east side for sports tourism or running a cross country meet, or the casino. How do we get them downtown to spend dollars at Saratoga, tacos and tequila, or combining it with the convention? So I think it was a good discussion.
We actually had lunch with Emily
Yeah.
from the casino yesterday.
Yeah.
Talked about motions and things like that and how she can help get folks to and from too, so.
Yeah, and I know, with Tennille's sales staff does the meetings to get, say, an out-of-town group. You guys have got those packages of here's some local amenities that go with it. And that was a good conversation with the casino. Hey, could you put some free play stuff potentially to help get that business going? And I was happy that you guys got to that level of detail, on really, when you're selling the convention, you're selling the Terre Haute experience. So positive step in the right direction.
Anything else you want to add?
May I ask him, do we consider putting things in writing, maybe not a contractual, maybe a memorandum of understanding? So when the mayor leaves or when their manager leaves, like done twice, we have an understanding, those who come behind. I know before we talked about.
Yeah.
There was a lot of conversation. But as those conversations left, from those conversations, nobody was around from those conversations, so it's.
I thought about putting an MOU together. I kind of I am gonna wait a couple of months to see, hey, like, here's what we're doing and here's what's working. Once we identify that, okay, these 3 tangible steps have helped. Okay, now we really need to work on transportation from one area to another. Once I get those, okay, here's what's worked, here's what hasn't worked, then I think that the board's next step would be an MOU sign between us and Churchill Downs, just to keep it locked in. Especially as you mentioned, there's gonna be a time when everyone in this room's different, so that is something that we are gonna move to probably. Hopefully by the end of the year, but we do wanna test a few things, because I don't wanna put it behind it and it's like, that's not working, so here's the second MOU, I'd like to get it done just once.
What did they say about transportation?
So they have a bus system that they use for their east side hotels, that they're exploring. Working with that vendor and the convention center for when the convention center has larger hotel rooms booked downtown, and how we connect that. That was the focus of that conversation.
And basically, we're kind of those hotels out there, come down here to these hotels, when she has a larger event. So everybody up. Take it in.
But when we have big cross-country events, they take up all the hotels and they eat at all the restaurants.
Oh, yeah,
Downtown, Southside, and.
they're all over the place. I don't know if you've been to Olive Garden during a Division I national championship cross country race.
I have not, but
Yeah, it's packed.
everybody
Yeah.
wants pasta.
Yeah,
Well,
don't even Uber Eats at that night, folks. It's gonna be long.
outside of the air show, it's the largest event. Those Nike events are the largest events.
Anything else? We're gonna go into other business here. Mr. Arnold, I know you're here to speak on Indiana Theater, if you want to talk about that for a minute.
No.
Yeah.
My name is Jerry Arnold. I'm the founder and director of Crosley Radio Players. Know some of you people for many years. And I first talked to Don Lewis, who many of you know, and then also to Beth Tevlin. Beth said I should speak to you folks about it. There's a lot of us who are really in support of redoing the Indiana Theater. And, you know, I talked to the mayor about that too. He had quite a discussion about that the other day. And of course, we don't have that kind of money, you don't either, but we would like to start a fund, call it Save the Indiana, call it whatever you want, doesn't really matter, where people could make donations. And it would go to them, and maybe you could have a fund somewhere or earn interest, I'm not sure about that, that'd be something you have to work with the local banks on. But I'm not sure how to do that, but as found the Crosby player, we played for Indiana once, and it was the biggest crowd we played. We sold 604 tickets there, and we did the War of the Worlds, the original 1938 radio broadcast there, and it was quite well received. And it's the history of that place. We're the only city in the United States that has 2 examples of John Emerson's architecture. One's right down here at the old Scottish Rite. The other, of course, is the Indiana. And they used to send architectural students here to study those. I don't know if they still do or not. But if not, they should, because there are 2 different periods, because one was built in 1915, the other was built in 1922. But we would like to start that fund, and we're willing to make a fairly sizable donation, at least sizable for us, to start that fund. If we get some, but we just can't have the fund and not everybody know about it. We've got to have a way of letting people know, hey, if you'd like to really support Indiana, send your donation to Save the Indiana at whatever it is.
Could we call it Friends of the Indiana?
Yeah, it'd be fun. And call it whatever you want.
Yeah, so after you spoke to Beth, Beth called me and we had a conversation. She's already starting that fund.
Mhm.
And she will, I think it was the Hometown Savings Bank, First Financial, Old National, and maybe Rydell, not Rydell. Fifth Third maybe will be the banks accepting. She's working through some stuff where we can be eligible for matching grants and stuff like that within those funds. So that is happening right now.
Okay, so is their idea to make it where person you write a check, saving, whatever the name of it is, and you send it to that bank, they know what to do with it?
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah, very good. Beth is gonna help us with that.
Okay,
And we-
Then she would send you a letter saying that this was.
yes,
deductible.
yeah, sure.
And we would help promote that.
We could.
Beth might be done with that. Actually, I haven't talked to her since last week, but.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Tell me more about your group.
Okay, what would you like to know?
Just what is it and what do you do
Well, this is our 18th year. We started as a one and done. We do live recreations of 1930s and 40s radio shows. And we started as one as a Christmas gift for Meadows Manor North up at 41 in Fort Harrison, because a friend of mine was at that time the maintenance director there. And he loved old time radio, and he thought it'd be a nice Christmas gift, because at that time the youngest resident they had there was 94, the oldest went to 103. So we did an episode of Third McGee and Molly and some news and music. And I went back to pick up my equipment the next day, and one of the nurses grabbed me and says, "You have no idea the effect you've had on these people." And said, we've got one man here he's 91, he says, he's been here 9 years, he has no family left. And he had not smiled once in the 9 years he'd been there until he was talking about our show. Wow, that really got to me. So I thought nothing else of it. So 3 weeks later, I get a call from Westminster Village. We understand you do recreations of old radio. Yes, we do. We'd like to hire you. Wait, what's that word, hire? Yeah, we'll pay you for it. We've been to Westminster Village 12 times, because
Really?
anybody who's been in that building knows they've got a nice little theater on the ground floor with a seat over 150 people. We've been down there, we've done dinner theater. When Grandma Joy's was Tuscany, we did a dinner theater out there every 6 weeks, and on a Thursday, because Friday and Saturday they had a good enough crowd anyhow, and he asked me to do it another night, and I said, whatever night you want. So we did it on Thursdays, and we sold that place out every time, which with all the bypass and bifold doors they had back there was roughly 450 to 500. So the restaurant was real interested in that, selling 500 dinners on a night when they normally would be selling 25. And you folks remember Victory Days at the airport many years ago? They hired us to do 2 shows a day on the family side of it, which was very nice. We've done stuff in Illinois. The Fountain Park Chautauqua, which is way up in northern Indiana, hired us to do a show there. It's one of the only 3 Chautauquas left on the original Chautauqua circuit that was started back around 1900. And we did a show up there, and it's a lot of fun. People love it. And the funny thing is, they said, well, yeah, it's fine for seniors. Of course, I'm a senior myself now, but it got to be where, like at the dinner theater, first one would be older folk. And then the next one, the older folk would be there with their adult children. And then the third one would be the older folk, the old children, and the minor children of the middle generation. And the guy asked me, said, well, aren't the kids bored to death? No, they never knew anything like this ever existed. It's so old, it's new to them. And they were just fascinated. I've had 5 parents come up to me and ask if we ever had roles for children. And we do on occasion. And we've used, and they've been very, very good. We do an annual Christmas show down at the Activity Center down at 5th and Poplar every year, because they let us rehearse there free, which is very nice of them. So we try to do as much to help them out as possible. And 2 years ago at our biggest show, we found out there'd never been a radio version of the movie White Christmas done. You all remember Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye? Well, I sat down with the DVD and a legal pad and started scribbling and turned a 2-hour and 1-minute movie into a 90-minute radio show. And we had to go borrow chairs to have enough seats for people. We probably exceeded the fire code that night.
No, we don't even. Let's move on to that topic.
So what's the extent of what you need for the stage?
I'm sorry.
What do you need for the stage? Like, what's your production? Is it minimal?
Yeah. Mhm. Oh, yes. Back when we were doing it out at Tuscany, there was in one corner of would be the farthest southeast of the building, there was a fireplace, and they had a 1 step up, but it was big enough for a stage, and that's what we used. So And we have all our own equipment. One thing we use, most of the microphone on the back of my jacket here. Those are RCA ribbon microphones, which they used back then. We're very fortunate. We have 4 of those. And the 4 of them are together worth about $15,000. But they're not just props. They are our stage microphones. They look nice and they sound nice. We try to do as many sound effects live recreation as possible. The War of the Worlds, when we couldn't do those, when the Army is firing their cannon at the Martians, we couldn't do that, but we try to do as many as we can that are alive, and then we normally have our sound effects person sitting out front right by the stage so people can see how the sound effects were done back in those days. And it's quite a lot of fun. We've had notoriety in several broadcasting magazines about it. In fact, one of them, Paul McLean, who's the editor, general manager of one of them, came out on his own nickel because he was in a group like that. They're headquartered in Washington, DC. He came out on his own nickel to see it and be in one of our shows, which of those. And then he wrote a really nice article about it in the next issue. So we don't grow much, but we do grow. And it's a lot of fun, and people are always asking when the next show is going to be and where. So we're open for anybody who wants to have us. And a normal show for us, and like I said, at Christmas, we just did the White Christmas by itself, because that was 90 minutes. But a normal show will start with a drama or adventure, half hour, to me, anything from Lone Ranger to Inner Sanctum. And then we'll do a couple period correct commercials, because they had commercials back then too. And we'll do a musical segment. I've got several very talented people in my group who sing very well, although it's not always just music. Sometimes Steve Hall, I know Steve from radio, known him for almost 50 years now. He and I, we haven't done it for a while. We'll do some Abbott and Costello, and the audience likes that quite a lot. And then another commercial, and then we do a comedy. And the comedies, the thing about comedy on radio is the formula. You can't use all the old comedies because comedy was very susceptible to the day. You had to know what was going on then to understand it. Well, now you're trying to get somebody 80 years down the road to figure out what that was. No, but there are other comedies, like I've mentioned, Fibber McGee and Molly was one, and that was done so you didn't use that formula. They had, it's funny, one of the guys in Fibber McGee and Molly, Bill Thompson, who had 5 different roles, was from Terre Haute. And he did a lot of things, like one of his favorite characters was called Wallace Wimple. That's where the term "he's a wimp" came from. And he spoke kind of in a little list like "Good morning with Piggy." And he had this wife named, we call Sweetie Face, who was always beating him up. Today that might not go so well, because you talk about violence in marriage, but it was very, very funny. And then they had another neighbor, Abigail Uppington, who was the snooty high society matron. And she was always looking down her nose at Fibber McGee, and he would give it right back to her. He called her uppity or uppy. And then they had a neighbor kid who was, the voice was also done by the woman Marion Jordan, who was also the voice of Molly, but she would do the voice of Teeny, the little naughty kid in the neighborhood. And when they do jokes, they'd have her get the punchline, because it's much funnier for a kid to get a snap-on joke against an adult. Give you a quick example of one we did out at barbecue on Wabash. We did it on St. Valentine's Day, that we were actually date correct with our episode. The episode of Fibber McGee and Molly was broadcast on Valentine's Day, 1940. But we're doing Valentine's Day a couple years ago. And Fibber's trying to figure out a gift to give his wife for Valentine's Day. And he can't think of anything. Well, Teeny, the little girl, comes over and he tells her what we're doing. She says, "Well, I've got a gift I know Mrs. McGee would like. They're not expensive." "What?" "Ice skates." "Ice skates." "Well, Mrs. McGee is a good skater, and it is winter still, but where would I get ice skates at this time of the day?" "From me." "You got ice skates to sale?" "Yeah, and they're not expensive." "Well, how much you ask for?" "Only 50 cents. 50 cents, that's great. Here's 2 quarters. What I can't figure out is why you're selling to me at that price." And Teeny says, Well, my daddy said he knew you'd like him because he knew everything about cheapskates. He was the kind of company, it's still funny today. I'm sorry? Well, we can do a show. Probably every 6 weeks. And, we have done that. Like I said, when we were doing it out at Tuscany, we were doing a show every 6 weeks. Then when we closed that one and went to the Tuscany in Paris, we were there every 6 weeks for another place where there was much smaller. And we couldn't get more than about 100 to 120 people in it. But we still will do it, and that's why we're interested in Indiana because it hits seating when that's the biggest crowd we played to. We did, like I said, 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast, and I had enough left over in my budget that I hired a guy who still has a 5-foot diameter World War II vintage carbon arc searchlight. And I got permission to put it on catty corner across in Indiana there on the bank lot. And had it going back and forth across the sky, searching the sky for Martians. And remember when you were a kid, you used to see those things? Daddy, let's go see it. What is that? And that was on a Friday night. And normally on a Friday night, you can shoot a gun down Ohio Street and not hit anyone. Well, that caused so many people to come downtown that the Terrell Police had to send an officer out to direct traffic.
I appreciate you sharing all that. I didn't even know it existed. Do you guys have like a Facebook page or somewhere
Yes.
where you?
CrosleyRadioPlayers.com. That's our own website, and we're also on Facebook too.
Very cool. I'm, where my head's going is doing a show here. You know, a Christmas themed show or something
You bet.
there, and I think I would come to it for sure.
Well, it's a lot of fun.
Eddie'd buy a table.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm waiting to develop a show about Terre Haute's legends and lore.
Well, not totally.
You don't get to pick what the show.
My father.
And every one of the shows we do has been broadcast on the air one time or another. So we again, Bill Thompson, the guy from Terre Haute who was in Frederick Molly, mentioned Terre Haute in about 6 different episodes. And that was on the air from 1935 to 1959. It's on a long time. I don't know if we can do a show expressly about Terre Haute, but we can sure make some major references to it there.
No, I appreciate you coming. I appreciate your support for the Indiana Theater and.
Will you folks let
me on.
public know when there is?
Yeah, I'll touch base with Beth this afternoon and see what's going on and see what all she got finished. And
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I've got lots of people who say, well, let me know when that's open, we'll send a donation. Now, the donation may only be $10, but you get enough $10, pretty soon you have 100. So anyway, we'd really like to help out with that and get what we could, we'd love to play there again. One reason we only played there once, when we played there, Roger Ailshire owned it. And Roger was a nice guy, and that's where I got to, he gave me the grand tour. And we did it on the 71st anniversary of the original broadcast. And that was in October, of course, when the weather's still pretty nice around here. And he gave me, he charged me $500 plus I had to come up with that one night, $1 million liability policy, which was $168. So $668 for one night, which I thought was fairly reasonable. After we did that, we wanted to have another show there. By that time, he had sold it, and the next guy gave me a quote of $5,000. I said, see you.
Right.
so, well, thank you for all the information.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, questions and comments from CIB board members. In April, I won't be here, the mayor won't be here, so I don't know if everybody can meet, or we can just skip April and go to May. That would put us at May. May 28th. May 28th. The finance committee will still have to meet, in April to approve claims for the convention center stuff, but if everybody's okay with that, that's all we'll do. Okay. Second, Eddie and I kind of discussed beforehand, there could be a potential state law that will require us to record or live stream our meetings as they're happening. We currently do that, but it also requires we post agendas, stuff like that as well. So we have capabilities of doing that here, we have capabilities of doing that at Beagle County Annex and the council chambers. I don't care what we do. As far as it goes with these meetings, sometimes it's a heck of a lot easier to me at the annex because we have 2 employees from the auditor's office here. We have all the capabilities to do all the live streaming and archiving to the county's YouTube page, website. So we want to consider that.
And that's July, so.
We have time to worry about that and think about that. Any other questions or comments? Any motion to adjourn?
One second.
All in favor?
Uh,